Okay. This is an interview with Jay Wolf. We're doing this as part of the Little Brown Jug Oral History Project that's being done by the Delaware County Historical Society. We're meeting in the log cabin on the fairgrounds, and today is August the 18th. Just for the record, I'll spell Mr. Wolf's name. It's Jay-W-O-L-F. My name is Richard Levy, and I just want to start off saying thank you for agreeing to do this interview. I'm going to start at the very beginning. As I understand it, your father was the person who took you to the first Little Brown Jug race. Could you say when that was, and would you comment a bit on your first impressions?
Yeah, it was 1981. Fan Hanover won that year. If you may or may not know, there was a couple accidents, one in the elimination and one in the final, so obviously that stands out as my memory. But for years, my father had seats, and he was on the Jug Society on the fair board, so it was always a present around the house. But finally, I think in 1981, I think he got tired of me asking, so while he came, or I went to the races with him, I didn't see him much. He would always running around doing what he had to do, and so I know I was there with my mom, and so yeah, that was my first one, 1981.
Okay. What kind of impressions did it make on you?
Well, I mean, and obviously you're at the fairgrounds every weekend, and so you know when you're at the fairgrounds in in June and July, it's not as impressive, but when you get 40,000 people around here, it was quite the it's the visual stimulation, if you will. I mean, the sights, the sounds, the people you only see in magazines at the time. You were getting to see them in person, and so that was my first memory.
Okay. I think I know the answer, but about how many jugs have you missed since 1981?
I have missed one since 1981. I missed the 1999 jug, which was won by Blissful Hall. My wife went into labor on the morning of the jug, and my son came just after midnight on the day after the jug. So this year would be his 21st birthday on Jug Day, but unfortunately, thanks to the coronavirus, he'll have to celebrate elsewhere.
Yeah. So I'm going to guess that you caught the jug bug early. Can you say why?
I mean, it's part of a family tradition. It's part of the community tradition. It's right here. I mean, I can't imagine living 3 miles from Lambeau Field and not being a Packer fan. I can't imagine living 3 miles from Notre Dame Stadium and not being a Notre Dame fan. So obviously, it's something that was always around the house when I was growing up. My dad, we would go to Sydney Fair, we would go to the Plain City Fair, I mean, we would go to the races throughout the year. So obviously when it came to your own backyard, it was something special.
Okay. Well, somewhere in this, you became the unofficial historian of the jug. I think it had something to do with Roger Houston, yes?
Yes. My family had box 435, so whenever you come up the walkway there in the grandstand, ours was the very first box you walked into. So a lot of people would stop and talk, and people would come by. Well, one year David Miller won 7 races, and Roger gets on the microphone and says, "We think it's a record." And I said, "That's kind of embarrassing that we think it's a record." I said, "We've only been doing this since 1939. It shouldn't be that hard. Is it a record or isn't it a record?" So I happened to run into Roger, I think at the Brown Jug restaurant downtown Delaware after the races, and I asked him, I said, "Were you embarrassed to say that you think it's a record?" He goes, "Well, Jay, no one could tell me otherwise." And I said, "I tell you what, when you come back next year, I will tell you whether it was a record or not." So that summer, I was working downtown there on Winter Street, and it was a block and a half from the library. So I spent quite a few lunch hours at the library putting dimes into the microfilm printer. So now I'm the proud owner of every article that the Gazette ever published on the races. So I have binders. We have them separated by years, and so sure enough, it was a record at the time, which has since been broken a couple times, including by David. But yeah, it was a record. So Now I have it all in a database, and a friend of mine, Lee Yoakum at the Delaware Gazette, found out I was doing about it, so he asked me if I would sit with him during Jug Week up in the press box when he was writing for the Gazette, so he could say, okay, now how many wins is that for Joe Adamski? Well, that's his 68th win. And so it started turning into something like that. And I met a gentleman by the name of Tom White. Tom was the publicity director here. Tom was a dear friend, and so then a couple years later he asked me if I would help him with being the assistant publicity director. So I think I did that for 10 or 12 years, and he retired and asked if I would take over, and so I've been doing that ever since. So
Is that fun, being the publicity?
it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. I try to do as much as I can in January, February, and March, so when August and September comes, I'm not as hectic. But you're updating media guides, you're writing stories, you're putting together the eligibility lists, you're putting together, top 10 lists for who's coming or who can come and who can't come, and it's just a lot of fun. It's I actually have a spreadsheet now that I go down at the end of every year. I do this file first, and then this file, then this file. So it's become sort of a regimented routine for me after the Jug. So I think I was officially done with this Jug in the middle of October, or the last year's Jug in the middle of October, and I was pretty well prepped in the January, February, and then when COVID hit, I thought I had had more time, but unfortunately I had nothing to do because I had done it all. So yeah, it's a year-round event for me.
Well, you have seen many races,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm assuming that maybe you can think of the top 2 or 3
Mm-hmm.
that you think were really memorable.
Yep.
What would those be?
First one, let's do the David Letterman top 10 list. Number 3, I'd probably say Life Sign, which was 1993, which will go into number 1. Number 2 is probably Wiggle It, Jiggle It. I mean, obviously, as a publicist's dream, you have a great horse, you have a great family, you have a horse, a great name. I mean, everything, all the stars aligned. You had a great race. They were great to deal with. They came back the next year. Wiggle It came back last year and raced here. So, it's a publicist's dream. But honestly, my favorite's 1992. Most people don't talk about it, but they had a horse called Western Hanover who was going for the Triple Crown. He had won the Cane and won the Messenger. He was trained by Gene Regal, who happened to be our Wall of Fame honoree that year. So here he is. He's getting inducted into our Wall of Fame. He has a chance to be a Triple Crown winner. Then we had a horse by the name of Fake Left, who was going to be driven by Mickey McNichol, who was kind of a journeyman at the time. And Mickey gets hurt a couple races before the Jug when his sulky actually comes loose and he gets dumped to the track. So they take him to Grady Memorial Hospital to get checked out. And so now you have a Hall of Fame trainer, George Schulte, who brings this horse in his later years of his career to Delaware and has to find a substitute driver and picks Ron Waples, who's a Hall of Famer in his own right. So the first heat, Fake Left beats Western Hanover by a head. The second heat, they come back and Western Hanover beats Fake Left by a head, and then they have to come back for the race off. So in the race off, Fake Left beats Western Hanover by a head, or actually by a nose, and it was just one of those things where what if Mickey McNichol doesn't get hurt, and does the race? How does the race change? And if the race changes, does Western Hanover win? And just when you start thinking about all the dynamics of '92, it's always been one of my favorites.
I find it remarkable that nobody else has commented on that race.
I mean, Life Sign. I mean, you've heard the stories of Life Sign. I mean, when the greatest driver of all time says it was his worst drive ever,
and wins.
It wins. Obviously that's a gutsy performance. And if you were here in 2015 for Wiggle It, Jiggle It, that'll forever go. And I was in the press box and I still didn't know he won. I'm looking around and everyone's looking at me and who won? And then finally when we heard Roger Houston say, lost for words, didn't lose today, he just got beat by a better horse. And, and it's like, oh wait, Wiggle It actually won? So then this excitement started to happen. But yeah, 92 was one of my favorites. I mean, kind of goes, like you said, under the radar. But when you start looking at all the backstories and all the what ifs and how the stars aligned, obviously for George Schulte, the trainer, and Ron Waples, the driver. So,
what do you think makes the Little Brown Jug special?
a lot of things. I think first of all, it's the people. The people who make this week their vacation, the people who want to camp up here this week, and it's the people who revere it as much as we do. It's the animals. It's the interaction between the John Campbells and the David Millers of the world with the folks. You can walk down the backstretch and pass 3 Hall of Famers, and at any one moment, it's the traditions of the people who chain their chairs to the fence and the people who turn their grain trucks into moving bleachers. It's all that. And I always say the jug wouldn't be what it is without the fair, and our fair wouldn't be what it is without the jug. And I just hope we always remember that, both of them have to work in unison to make sure that this is great, and make sure that people keep coming back and having a fun time.
Okay. You mentioned the tradition of chaining the chairs. Are there traditions that you think just should never be changed about this race?
Well, obviously having the race here in Delaware.
Okay.
I know people have talked about heat racing. I think we need to be flexible. We need to be flexible. The world's changing, the animals are changing, people's thoughts on heat racing change. We could be sticklers and stick to our tradition, but if no one wants to heat race, then we'll have a race with 2 horses. So I think we need to be flexible in our tradition, but I think the one tradition that we should never change is the race here in Delaware, Ohio. As I mentioned, the fair, we're in the Midwest where a lot of the racing got started. It's got to stay in Delaware. I kind of chuckle. The Meadowlands, they host the Hamiltonian every year. And what do? They bring in rides, they bring in vendors. They're trying to make it a fair. They're trying to make this big city race into a fair atmosphere. And here we have the fair atmosphere with the race. So, I think we just need to keep it here in town and keep going, hopefully for another 75 years.
Would you keep it on a Thursday?
There's been talk. What if we race the Limbs on Saturday? And we have a giant monster down the street called Ohio State University, and we're still feeling it today. I know Urban Meyer used to have his press conferences on Thursday at noon. So channel 6, 4, 10, 28, sorry, we're covering Urban Meyer's press conference, and we're not going to cover your jug. But they eventually come up, but it's not usually until 4:30 or 5 o'clock at night. So, that's one of the quirkinesses of Delaware is we race on a Thursday. Friday's usually typical high school football. Saturdays is college football. So Thursday seems to be working quite well. Little known fact that the first few jugs weren't even held on Thursday. They were originally scheduled for Wednesdays, but it rained like the second or third Wednesday, and they said, you know what, let's just move it to Thursday. So actually, the first few jugs were actually held on Wednesdays. So.
Okay. So over the years, there have been changes, and for instance, from Wednesday to Thursday. What would you say are some of the major changes that you've seen over the years?
Mm-hmm. I think the big one's simulcasting. In the past, if you wanted to watch the Little Brown Jug, you had to get in your car and drive here. I'm going to use our friends in Lebanon, Ohio. Right now, the Lebanon, Ohio, they would have to drive an hour and 15 minutes to get here. Pay $25 or $20 to get in here. Have to fight the crowd, or they can drive to Miami Valley Raceway, which is 5 minutes from their house. They don't cost anything to park. They can eat, drink, be merry there. So, simulcasting obviously has created more fans, but I think it's probably hurt our atmosphere and our attendance in the long run. We're a convenient society. We want everything now, and we want it easy. We want it, when we want it, and so there's a little bit of the romance, if you will, that's been lost due to the fact that, you can drive to Saddle Downs and watch the race, or you don't even have to drive anywhere. You can just pull out your iPhone now and watch the jug and bet on it, and so we need to make sure that we keep creating an atmosphere and a program that people want to see in person. So Well, I mean, I think the big thing that we need is money. John Campbell is on our Jug Society, and he says if you guys race for $1 million, they would race up and down 23. You know, I mean, if you make the purse what it should be or needs to be, you're going to draw the best horses. People forget we only race 5 days a year. Scioto Downs races, I think, 65 days a year, but they run the slot machines 365 days a year. So they're getting revenue 365 days a year. We're getting revenue 5 days a year. So, you know, one of the things is we need to figure out, you know, unique ways to get support, whether it's through government or through, you know, industry organizations and sponsors for, you know, we just need to keep working on the money aspect of it.
I'm going to circle back. So your dad was really involved in harness racing, and so he brought you in,
Mm-hmm.
and you're committed to this. And so if you don't mind me asking, what is it like for your son? Is this something you see being passed down?
Not to the level of what I have. You know, when I was growing up, there was not, you know, 24-hour cable television networks. You know, I mean, there wasn't sports on demand. You know, there wasn't video games in which I could put a headset on and talk to someone in California while I'm playing it. You know, I think a lot has changed when it comes to our entertainment. You know, I used to get a weekly magazine that had the race results in it. You know, the Horseman and Fairwood. You'd get that every week. You would go through it, see who won and who didn't win. Well, now you log into your computer and boom, I can find out 10 seconds after the race who won. The charted lines are all in there. The pictures are up and, you know, within minutes. So, you know, technology's obviously helped, but it also, I think, has hurt the next generation. We need to show them that it is fun, it's exciting, it's something to do. I mean, my son will go to the races with me, and he has fun, and, you know, but it's just, you know, I think the deep love that I have, he probably doesn't have.
Yeah.
So.
I'm guessing that's a little hard.
Nah. You know, I never never wanted to push my son into something he doesn't want to do. I mean, if he becomes the best person that he can be and makes great changes to the world, you know, God bless him. You know, I mean, I'll work on what I love, and, you know, hopefully he'll find something that he loves, and he'll work as hard on that as what I do with the Jug, and we'll be fine.
Well, you mentioned that getting the purse to $1 million is a goal, and that would help to sustain this event. Are there any other things that you think could be added, could be modified to sustain this into the future?
Well, I mean, I think we need to look at, you know, like I said, I mentioned simulcasting. You know, should the race always be held on a Thursday? Sure, but do the races on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday need to be raced at, you know, 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock on Monday? You know, could we race at 5 o'clock? Could we race at 6 o'clock? You know, there's a lot of people out there that actually still work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they take Jug day off, hopefully. But are there things that we can be doing internally to cut expenses and increase revenues? And I think everything we need to look at, I mean, we have to look at every opportunity. Are there partnerships we can build?
To what extent do you see the Jug as being a critical part of the county? So that, for instance, if the Jug left Delaware, it would have, I assume, some kind of impact?
I mean, as I said, we race 5 days a year, but there's horses stabled on this ground 365 days a year. You got veterinarians, you got trainers, you got grooms, you've got feed suppliers, you got truck dealers, you got trailer dealers. I mean, you know, the Jug is horses are a huge economic impact to the community, and you know, we need to make sure that we, you know, stay out in front of the folks here in town locally and make sure that they understand how important it is. And you know, it's more difficult. I mean, I'm sure if I walk through downtown Powell and mention Little Brown Jug, they would kind of turn their head to the side a little bit. But you know, the community's changing, and we've got to go out there and make sure that we keep you know, beating the drum, if you will, for the race.
I know you as a storyteller,
Okay.
and so this is a bit of a curveball, but do you have a go-to story, something that you love to tell,
Okay.
so that people will understand or laugh about this race?
Yeah. I don't even remember the year, to be honest with you. But as I mentioned, our box seats were at the top of the steps. So when you walked in the grandstand, you go to the top of the steps, we're the very first box you see. And it never failed. We would get up there and there would be someone sitting there or standing there, and there was an older gentleman sitting there. And I just sat down next to him and said, "Hey, how are you today?" And he goes, "Fine." He goes, "Is this your box?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "I'll move." And I said, "No." I said, "You're fine." This was Wednesday. This was a Jugette day. I said, "You're fine." I said, "We're only going to use 6 of the 8 seats. You're fine." And he goes, "Well, obviously I'm older and can't get up." And so we started talking. He was from Canada. And I asked him in the conversation, I said, "Well, where are your seats tomorrow?" And he says, "I'm in section J." And I said, "Oh, okay." He asked if I'd run some bets, so I'd run down to the windows and make some bets for him, because obviously he had a hard time getting up and down. The only reason he wasn't sitting in his seats is he would have had to climb another 25 steps, and he would rather just sit here. And I was fine with it. But at the end of the day, I looked, and his jacket was laying there. So I picked his jacket up and I put it in his car, or put it in my car. And the next day, when I got there, I waited till right about post time. So I walked around section J and I found him, and I gave him his jacket back, and he started crying. And I said, "Well," he says, "you don't realize how important this jacket is to me." And he says, "My wife gave it to me last year for a present, and she passed away." And he says, I'm amazed that you took the time to find me." And I said, "Well, yesterday I asked you and you said you were sitting in section J." And he says, "But how did you find me amongst all these people?" And I said, "Well, it's not many people that have a Molson Canadian beer hat." And he says, "Well, you're probably right." So, I wished him well, and he thanked me. Well, about 2 weeks later, I get a package in the mail, and it was from Canada. And I'm like, "What is this?" So I opened it up, and it was a Molson Canadian hat. And inside was a note saying, "Hey, now you have one of your very own." So I have a Molson Canadian hat, so obviously the return address, so I put a Jug hat on it, sent it to him with a note saying, "I hope to see you next year." Well, of course, the next year I looked around in section J, and I did not see him. So, but I had my Molson Canadian hat on in case he saw me. So, but it's just one of those things where he took the time. It would have been easier to say, "Yeah, get out of my box," But you take the time, you get to talking to people, you find out that this was a part of his tradition every year to come down here, and his wife had passed away. The amazing thing, I think, is he stopped one of the fair board members, who happened to be Bill Lowe, and asked him who I was. And then he asked him if Bill would be willing to give him my address. So, he obviously went out of his way to do something nice for me. So that's always one of those stories where I say, it's a little horse race to some people, but it means a lot to a lot of other people. And, whether a prince or a pauper, you'd be nice to everyone and it'll come back. And so that was always something I've been taught, and so I'm glad it worked out.
It's a great story.
Yeah, it's one of those where it has really nothing to do with the race, but it was just, part of the interaction you have with the people that sit around you, and so I hope you enjoyed it.
Okay. Are there any other things that you think we should know about in order to make this a complete oral history?
Well, first of all, you've done a fabulous job. I think I'm one of the last ones to be interviewed, so I've got to see a lot of them. I just, like I said, the Jug means a lot to a lot of different people, and a lot for me. It's a family tradition carrying on my dad's legacy, and I think it's the community's legacy as well. So, it's the little things that you remember, and you remember where you were when this horse won, or you remember where you were standing when this horse won, and it's just the little things, and so just keep gathering the stories, and let's keep them together.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Mm-hmm.